waiting room. Whew. Well, good afternoon, everyone. If you're in Central Standard Time, it is now officially 3 minutes into afternoon. If you are tuning in from another time zone, a good day to you. My name is Reverend Dr. Gia Starr Brown, and I'm really, really glad that you are here. I am the founding pastor of the stable. And the stable you'll see is a meaningful online learning space. We gather on now Tuesdays, today, and Thursdays to peel back colonial layers that have overshadowed the gospel message and reveal the true radiance of Jesus and his ministry. For those who do not know me, I would let you know that I live in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. I am ordained in DOC, Disciples of Christ. And the stable is an official kind of congregation in formation in the Disciples of Christ. And we're just connective tissue. I create this space for us not to do church in the ways that we may have grown accustomed to, but for us to learn how to be church. And so people come to these spaces not only as people that are part of the Disciples of Christ, but this is an ecumenical, this is an open space. And I'm really glad that people that were able to come together as family and neighbors to learn and to grow together. And so, in addition to that, I also do quite a bit of work, anti-racism work, designing and facilitating anti-racism programming through a faith lens. I'm really, really excited to be joined by my friend and my colleague, Reverend Dr. Aimée Appell. I will let her introduce herself, but what I will say is that there's many of you that either are watching live or tuning in to the recording that will be familiar with ARTS. We call it the Anti-Racism Tech Study because Dr. Aimée and I put our heads together and decided that we wanted to do something like this about a year ago to really focus on to bring a critical lens to our understanding and interpretation of Scripture. And so originally, Arts was underneath the umbrella of the White Lutherans for Racial Justice. And we have recently gotten our moving truck, as you may have seen on the flyer, and brought it over to the stable. And we're really glad that you are here, that you are joining us, whether you're in the ELCA or the DOC or in another denomination or not in any denomination, whether you are young or older or seasoned or not, whether you are clergy or lay or not, we're glad that you're here. And we'll be here every Tuesday for you to hop on. So if you registered, you don't need to register every week. We just want to know who's in the room. So you registered this first time, and it's so great to know that, just also for security reasons, right? To know who's in the room. But this will be the link that we use every Tuesday, and we will record every Tuesday. So if you miss this, know that you can subscribe. I'll send an email to the YouTube channel to subscribe, so you will be able to catch the recordings if you miss it. Okay, we will be leaning in and following the schedule of the new revised of the Revised Common Lectionary schedule. So we are moving ahead and looking at what's happening, the texts that are coming up, for the upcoming Sunday. So if you are a preacher, if you're a pastor, if you're a ministry leader and you're following that in your congregation, we're right along there with you. And if you're curious and exploring, it's a really great way for us to dive deep into Scripture in this way. So now that I've kind of done all the housekeeping introduction stuff, I'm going to pass this on over and invite my friend and colleague, Dr. Aimée, to introduce herself and to catch whatever I forgot to say, and to open us in prayer.
So yeah, hi, I'm Aimée Appell. I'm a pastor in Washington, Missouri, which is about an hour west of St. Louis. And I serve a congregation called Peace Lutheran. It's a ELCA Lutheran congregation. And I serve on the board of White Lutherans for Racial Justice. And I did my doctoral work with the question in mind of how to preach about race and racism as a white pastor in white contexts. And so, this is really dear to my heart this work, particularly when it comes to the work of preaching and removing the barriers that stand in the way of the true gospel message, especially the barriers that come from white supremacy culture. So that's me. I'm joined here today by Zabumafu the cat and Namu the dog, and T'Challa the dog is somewhere. He was on my lap a minute ago, but then Zabu moved in. So you may see them come and go as I am here. And also my kids might pop up in the background because they're floating around the house too. So I have chosen a prayer for today from this book, The Lives We Actually Have. And it's by Kate Bowler and Jessica Ritchie. And it's a beautiful book of prayers. And the prayers are broken up into sections like prayers for when you're tired, prayers for when you're grieving, prayers for when you need rest, prayers for this lovely life. So the one I chose today comes from the prayers for a painful life, because this is the text today are about healing. And so I thought that would be a good place to start. So I invite you to enter into a spirit of prayer. Blessed are you on this pain-filled day, when getting out of bed seems to be an award-worthy triumph, when you can't remember what it feels like to not be so aware of your own body, when you arrange your weeks around appointments or side effects, or when you stop telling the truth altogether about how bad it hurts, how scared you are of your own mind, or the boring details of another non-diagnosis. Because you are afraid people have stopped caring. You speak a language of suffering the world doesn't try to understand. Blessed are you whose world has shrunk to a space so small it's defined most by what is no longer possible. You count, dear one, and so does your pain. It does not and did not disqualify you from belonging. For the truth of it is, life is painful, and what makes it so is the terrible and the beautiful living side by side. Our loves, our losses, our limits and hopes, our successes and failures. Some would try to sell us the fiction that there's an invincibility club, and we really should join if only we could qualify. But our God came to be cloaked in our fragility, in our humanity, to know our pain from the inside out. O suffering one, you will never, ever be left behind. You belong, you are loved, and you have never been forgotten. Come join us in the company of the broken. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. My goodness, and may it be so. All right, so I'm going to bounce around us a little bit here. I want to kind of let you know, if you're not familiar with the stable, this is a little poster that I found about how we're sharing space together. And I thought this was kind of cool. We're going to look and listen and be kind. There'll be time for us to share our thoughts and our conversations. So we're saying no bullying. Right? No yelling. And I love the shh at the bottom because for me, that for me means to be quiet and listen to the spirit, right? To kind of make room for the spirit. So just a way for us to kind of recognize how we're going to share space together. And a quick second for you to look at what we're talking about. We're talking about colonization, decolonizing. This is the work that we're doing for anti-racism. We are not just talking about the occupying of space. We're talking about the occupying of mental space, of emotional space. right? And the surfacing of fears, reliance of on consumerism, and our disconnection that we have from nature and ourselves and others. This is a little ambitious, but we're hoping to get through this by one. We're going to talk about the gospel text study, and then Dr. Aimée, I'll be guiding that, and then Dr. Aimée will follow up with some conversation with a little bit of study about what the supportive texts. If we have time, we're going to dig into, Dr. Aimée and I will have a conversation, but most importantly, we're going to pivot to our community circles. So there will be time at the end for us to talk about what's coming up for us, questions that we have, and thoughts and comments as well. So I'm going to dive right in, and I'm hoping that I am done. I'm going to ask Dr. Aimée to keep me honest in 20 minutes. So that's my goal. There we go. So even though one of the commonplace translations in the majority of our mainline denominations tends to be the New Revised Standard Version, the updated edition. I actually am going to deviate from that for this time and use the Inclusive Bible Translation. You'll see a picture of it up at the in the corner there. It's one of the things that I just tend to rely on. I appreciate the Inclusive Bible Translation. It's not perfect. No translations are perfect, but it is one that changes, that is mindful of pronouns and mindful of also thinking about ableism. It's mindful of perception, and I think that's really important. And so I'm glad to use that. So you can certainly follow along with your translation, but I'll be reading this one right here that's on the screen. What the gospel text comes from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 17, verses 11 through 19, for this upcoming Sunday. And on the journey to Jerusalem, Jesus passed along the borders of Samaria and Galilee. As Jesus was entering a village, 10 people with leprosy met him. Keeping their distance, they raised their voices and said, "Jesus, Rabbi, have pity on us." When Jesus saw them, he responded, "Go and show yourselves to the priests." As they were going, they were healed. One of them, realizing what had happened, came back praising God in a loud voice, then fell down at the feet of Jesus and spoke his praises. The individual was a Samaritan. Jesus replied, "Weren't all 10 made whole? Where are the other 9? Was there no one to return and give thanks except this foreigner?" Then Jesus said to the Samaritan, "Stand up and go your way. Your faith has saved you." This is the word of God for us, the hearers, the doers, the triers, the maybeers, the hopers, the thinkers of God. And we give thanks to God. So I'm going to dive right in. If you don't know me, I'm a language person. I'm a word nerd. I'm all about, how language flows. And so welcome to my brain and also to my fun. We're going to just take a moment and look at a few things. One of the first things I think is really important for us is to recognize, first off, that this carries a little bit of a cultural, a contextual, and a cultural connotation. So right off the top, we're hearing on the way to Jerusalem. And I don't want to make an assumption. There are people that are here that may be pastors and preachers. There are people here that are tuning in that are parishioners and people that, right? So I want to make sure that we're all on the same page with understanding what we mean. In our westernized culture right now in the United States, when people say after 9/11, we kind of know what that means. We know that 9/11, even just saying that, or after COVID, we know what that means because we lived through that. We don't have to go through the extensive storytelling of what happened on these days to people that were there and witnessed that or experienced that. Um, Side note, my third daughter is now was born in 2002, and so her graduating class was the first class to have not been alive during 9/11, which was like, what is happening? So on the way to Jerusalem is very similar to that. Jesus, in saying that, it is known then, right, that on the way to Jerusalem, Jesus was on the way to his execution, to his crucifixion. So when we see that on the way to Jerusalem, that is what is meant, is that he's on the way there. And what's interesting about that is that Jesus knew that, right? There was an awareness that that's where he was going. He knew that he was going there to leave this earthly realm. He knew that, and yet he is still. Isn't it interesting? Even in the midst of that, think about what would happen if you knew that your time to transition was coming up, and it was coming up fast, and yet he's still focused on ministering to the people. He's still focused on his call. He's still focused on the work that he has to do. He's so it's just interesting that even as he's going, he's not distracted by these other things that are happening. The other thing that I want to lift up too is that he where he's traveling. So on this map, what you're seeing here is there is this line here, right? So he's on his way to Jerusalem, right? This is where he's on his way. He's traveling down here, and this is where he's walking. He's walking between Galilee and Samaria. Now, anytime there are titles or names that are in Scripture, they always require they call for us to kind of pause and take a look and see what's happening. Why are we talking about this? And this is also another one of those things. So to say that he's traveling between these two, it's interesting. This space here is what some people this is what some people would call a no-name space. Some scholars would call that a no-name space. So this space that he's traveling actually wasn't in Galilee, right? It wasn't here, and it wasn't in Samaria. It's in this space in between that literally isn't a part of either one of those communities. It is this space that literally doesn't have a title. It's just kind of known that he's traveling between this space. And this space is a space that is no name. It's also the space where the invisible people are sent, where the people that are considered to be unclean, where people are cast out of society, where where distance is mandated. This is where people went. They went to this kind of no name space, and it's interesting that people that are considered to be invisible, right, are in this no name space. And Jesus, on the way to his crucifixion, is choosing to journey through the no name space to connect with the no name people, the unnamed people. This is his choice that's here. And it really reminds me, if you've ever gotten an email from me, at the bottom of my email, I have a quote that comes from Zora Neale Hurston, which says, you gotta go there to know there. Right. And so there is something about the fact that he's choosing to go to this space to connect with this group of people at a time when so many other things we would think would be on his mind. And so he's traveling there, and it says that as he's passing along, so as he's traveling there, meaning he knows he's going to encounter people that are unclean, that are outcast. He knows this, and that's important because he passes along. Where's my little and as he's passing, he connects with 10 people that have leprosy, which is a skin condition, which was known to be contagious. People were fearful of leprosy. There was this belief that if you had this skin condition, either you sinned, maybe your parents sinned. There was something unclean about this, and until if ever until that was resolved, you were cast out into these spaces. And so here are people that are contagious. So Jesus is walking in contaminated space, right? He's journeying through this space where people, literally beyond the bounds of laws. Remember, if there's no, they're outside of the territory, so there isn't governance here, right? They're in this no named kind of pocket of space. And as he's journeying here, intentionally journeying through contaminated space, here are 10 people that meet him, that approach him with leprosy and keeping their distance, meaning they're honoring. Isn't that interesting? That they who are considered to be, outside of the lawful parameters, beyond, reproach, that this is where they are, that they are still upholding the cultural laws and regulations that follow with somebody who's unclean, which is funny because a lot of times when people, we have this perception that people that are considered outcasts, that are beyond our communities, a lot of us have been indoctrinated. We've been brainwashed and conditioned to believe that they are not lawful and abiding citizens, that they're not people that respect the law. And so here it is interesting to hear people that that's not the case, that they actually are honoring that. So we hear in scripture that they are keeping their distance. And it's so funny because this passage is like literally riddled with bias. So that's what you're going to hear in the next 10 minutes. It's riddled with bias. And so part of it is that it's breaking through these barriers, and they are aware of this law. And they say, Jesus naming who he is, Rabbi. So they are also naming and acknowledging who he is. Have pity on us. And that recognition means they are aware of who Jesus is. They are aware of what of Jesus's healing capabilities. They are respectful of that in naming and calling him by his title. They are honoring that, right? And it's so important. You'll see here down in the section here that in the Old Testament, also known as the Hebrew Bible, there were laws, right? So I'm just kind of supporting, backing up my work, that there were laws that people needed to be separate if they were considered to be unclean, right? And that's what it says. They must live alone outside of the camp. And they are following these regulations. Now, what's interesting is Jesus says to them, he doesn't say, I'm going to heal you. What he says is, start making your way toward the priests. And the reason why that was important is because even though if he were to heal them, it were the priests that were in the position to be able to actually look and inspect the skin and certify that someone was actually healed and cleansed and able to return to community. So him telling them to go to the priests is another way, just like 9/11, of saying that he is going to heal them. And so they noticing that they don't, I'm going to circle back a little bit. Immediately it says, go and show yourselves to the priests. It doesn't say that they questioned why. It doesn't say that they said, we want to know what you're going to do before you do it. They didn't ask for any proof or verification before they moved, right? They didn't ask for any references or evidence that this was going to happen. They didn't ask for any promise keeping. They trusted. And the very next sentence says, as they were going, they were healed, right? So immediately I'm noticing that there is an obedience that's here, that we hear, and they move right on ahead and they go, and as they're going, they are healed. Now, there are some translations that say that the last of them realizing what had happened, right? This one says one of them, but there are some translations that say the last of them realizing what had happened. So as they are obeying, as they are following Jesus's words, as they are obeying, healing happens as they are obeying. So that healing is happening as they are actually following, right, and listening to God. So I'm just dropping these nuggets in here. And here it is, the one of them, the last of them, supposedly, realizing what's happened, seeing what's happening. So there's awareness, comes back praising God in a loud voice, right? And falls down at the feet of Jesus. And here's what's interesting. If you haven't seen this before on the bottom, I told you I'm a word person, right? And Dr. Aimée, I'm probably going to go to 1235. I'm already telling you that. You probably already knew that. But in the Greek interlinear, so if you go on your search engine, you can type in Greek interlinear Bible Hub. And what happens is it provides you with this kind of a snapshot. And so what this is here is this is the Greek that's right here from the New Testament. This is what it sounds like for us as we're looking at kind of the transliteration, how to pronounce the Greek. This is the English in the red so that we can see that. And this also at the bottom gives us some parsing and grammatical information that we need to understand how to do the translating. So what's interesting is this word here, Eucharistesas, is the same word that we find in other spots. So when we go back and we see here, I am going to make you dizzy, I'm sorry, that when they came down praising God, the other translations say thanking God, that same word is the same word that we find in Eucharist. in communion. It's the same word that we find when Moses fell prostrate before God, when Jesus fell prostrate before God. It is a communing word. It is a word that is literally honoring, right, the authority, the capability of God. It is a posture of reverence that's here. This is this communal experience that's happening. And that same word that we think of with Eucharist is the word that is used about when the last person returned to give thanks to Jesus. So there is an acknowledgement. You think about what happens when you go to communion. Think about what happens when we have communion. We have confession, right? We have an acknowledgement, right? A confession acknowledgement of like our sin, and we're coming with this posture before God, and we're having this conversation with God. We are literally eating and dining, and aligning with God. And so all of that is found in this Eucharistasis, right? This is what is happening. And so we notice, right, and I'm going to show you this here. Look at this. One of them, this comes from the NRSV UE version. When he was healed, he throws himself at the feet and he thanked him. And what's interesting is in the New Revised Standard Version, look, it says like one of them came back and he was a Samaritan. Just like we see here, one of them comes back and he's a Samaritan. And the fact that we even have to name that he was a Samaritan means it must have been something important. Samaritans were people that were known, Jews typically didn't speak to Samaritans. They had this reputation. They had been labeled as thieves with no moral compass, right? They had no regard. People believe they had no regard for the law, that they were not well groomed, right, individuals that honored the church. These are things that people would say. You stay away from those Samaritans, from those people. And so the fact that Luke is even using this, like, it almost, I get mad. I feel like what he really should have done was had an exclamation point here, because he actually was like in shock, like, even this Samaritan came back and said thank you. Like, can you believe that? This person came back after he was healed, throws himself at Jesus' feet in gratitude. Oh, and can you believe he was a Samaritan? And it reminds me of that same kind of, if in some old former translations, the subtitles of the Good Samaritan, as if we have to put the word good in front of Samaritan because most Samaritans aren't good. So we want you to know that here's the exception to the rule, that it was a good Samaritan. So keep reading, right? Stay the course, because there's something in it, because this Samaritan, this one is the exception to the rule. And we hear that a lot, right? When we think about some of the labels that go that are applied, toward people that are on the margins, these ideas that we have that somehow the perceived lack of moral compass is somehow contagious, that ill will is somehow spreadable, and the shock that even that this person who was a Samaritan came back praising God. So I want to say, oh, the bias, Luke, that you put into this text of even saying that, and the shock that here it is at the bottom, that this bias that we're thinking about, the expectations that we would never expect a Samaritan to be grateful, to return and be grateful. And it leads me to begin to wonder, what are our behavior expectations with people, that we deem to be different than us? Do we expect? There are some of those labels too, right? Where some of those people might be hardcore, and some of those people might be ungrateful, right? Some of those people will take from you but won't say thank you. Some of those people don't really want anything but what you have in your pocket. Some of these labels that we have, and then we just kind of manage our expectations according to our bias. And so here it is. Not everyone we expect to be grateful is grateful, right? And even Jesus, look at this, the fact that this is so important, that even Jesus wants to be appreciated. that we as people that you were studying, we are supposed to with every breath we are supposed to praise God, and in doing that we are acknowledging who God is and God's authority, and our posture in reverence, right, to the glory of God, that we are called, we are actually commanded to give thanks, and even Jesus appreciates being appreciated. That it's notable here that he comes back and right, the person comes back and he blesses that last person, that, oh my goodness, that Samaritan. And it led me to ask, I'm doing pretty good. I only have like 3 more slides. I'm doing pretty good. It led me down this path of Carl Linnaeus. And Carl Linnaeus, we think about, where did these biases come from? Where do we get these ideas about the posture of people, and how people behave and who they are? Carl Linnaeus was a very well-known person. He was into taxonomy. He did a lot of classifications. If you think back to your elementary school days when you had to classify a plant or a mammal, right? And an animal, like those classifications, he did that type of thing. And once he did that, he also did classifications along racial lines. He assigned traits to different races. And this was back in 1767. Okay. So I want you to know that. So you do the math for how far we are. So, I mean, we're talking almost 300 years later, and we're looking at some of this. So I want you to see he divided the world into 4 different species. There was Americanus, which was his word for our Native American siblings, indigenous siblings. So interesting that he put American, right? The first Americans with our indigenous siblings. Europeus were white-bodied siblings. Asiaticus were our siblings of Asian descent. And Africanus were our siblings of African descent. So I want to show you some of the classifications, just so that you can kind of see some of the bias. So when we look here, we're looking, for example, right here at the Americanus, he talks about the fact that their posture is red and choleric and straight. He talks about that they have their physical characteristics. Their stance is straight with black and thin hair and gaping nostrils, freckled face and beardless chin. But look at this here. There is this belief that their characteristic is unyielding. They're not willing to yield, that they're cheerful and they are free, that they are governed by the customary right, and that they are clothed in paint. Our white-bodied siblings are white and sanguine and muscular, plenty of yellow hair and blue eyes. But look at the posture: light, wise, inventor, innovative, very positive words, very, right, very hopeful pieces. Look at them: protected by tight clothing and governed by rights. rights, the rights of God. God is with us, the Europeans, right? Taking a look at this bias that's here. Africanus. Look at this. And you can look at some of these here that are considered lazy. Dark hair, twisting braids, right? Some connotations about the women, African descent women's anatomy. Look at their perceptions of sly and sluggish, neglectful, the biases. Oh my gosh. And he was a Samaritan that said thank you, right? You think about kind of where these biases, governed by choice, not by God, right? But we do what we want to do, right? Just kind of paying attention to kind of how this goes. And finally, look at this. Sallow as our siblings of Asian descent, melancholic and stiff. Look at these perceived pieces: stern and haughty and greedy, protected by loose garments, governed by opinions. We just think we're so great. We're so awesome. We're so self-focused. And you can think about where we see, right, some even almost 300 years later. You think about how the media reports and actually perpetuates these biases that we have, and how it actually dictates our understanding of ourselves and our perceptions of the other. The biases that say, this Samaritan, even this person, can you believe, came back and said thank you. The shock of that, the shock of these things, the perceptions that some people may not say thank you, some people may not be grateful, some may not have the capacity to do that. We would never expect someone like this to have to behave in this way, right? And what it leads me to as I'm thinking about this is like, is that shock that the last one noticed. A colleague and a friend of mine, another one, her name is Anna Stamborski. She lifted up this document that's called panning, and it is this practice that is panning means pay attention now, and it is this process that encourages us to avoid falling into the trap, that bias trap of making our snap judgments, and to interrupt our potential to create a story about what we see, to consider looking and paying attention to what's happening around us, right? And where the biases are coming from. To slow down enough and pay attention to what's happening around us without all the other stuff. And it says that to describe what you see or what you feel or what you hear without those assumptions and the biases, without the interpretations and the conclusions, without the prejudgments. Can we actually pay attention to what's happening without adding our layer of stuff and baggage on top of that we see here? Are we able to do that? Right? So in closures, we're thinking about this and don't feel like you have to see all of this. But one of the things I want you to see is this chart that I made that really kind of leans into Jesus's character, right? Where Jesus is going on the way to his crucifixion. He enters into these borders that aren't even on a map. There's no record of being here. He's literally outside of his comfort zones. He goes into this village, this space of nothingness, and Jesus still found people and still found love and still found, connection and kingdom there in this space. Where here, this 10 lepers were there that were known to be in the space of death before death. That's literally what it was called. Leprosy was death before death. And even in this space, they broke through the biases and the perceptions and honored the laws, because people who are on the margins, literally on the margins, are still expected to know the laws and the rules, are still expected to honor the laws and the rules. Even though they may not benefit from the laws and the rules, they are still expected to know those laws and those rules. To be interested to see that there is this expectation that Jesus had. Where are the other nine? This expectation of behavior. And only this foreigner, that even our beliefs, our thoughts on who would be the one to be grateful, who would be the one to turn around and show up and show gratitude, who would be that person to do that. There's so much richness that's here, but important to be able to pause and to name where we see the bias and how we see the bias showing up even in our own daily lives and ministry, right? Okay. Whew, I think I did pretty. I tried. I went over, but I tried. And that's okay. I want to invite you to consider some of the things that we're talking about. I'm going to pivot to Dr. Aimée because the supportive texts that are coming in the lectionary, they carry some of these common themes. And so if you're studying or preaching from these, we want to make sure that you have some of those themes as well. And then we're going to circle back to do some community conversations. Okay? All right.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Gia. So I'm going to share my screen, and first I'm going to let you know which text we're talking about. There we go. So the supportive text, the first reading following the thematic lectionary connection. So in the season of Pentecost, we have two choices for the Old Testament supportive text. One is the thematic text, which is connected by themes, in this case, the healing of leprosy. And it's the story of Naaman, the Syrian general who suffers from leprosy and is cured by Elisha. But there's a whole lot that happens in the story. And some of that gets skipped. You'll see here that we've got verses 1 to 3 and then 7 to 15. It's really important to check out those text verses that are missed in that text, because in that text, what the part that's missing in the lectionary is the part where Naaman says, "Why should I go to this prophet? He can't get healed." And then he tries to go and get help from the king of Israel, who says, "I can't heal you." And then his wife's slave girl comes to him. She is a slave of Jewish descent, and she comes and says, there's this prophet in Israel, and you should go to him and ask for his help. So that gets left out of the story, but it's a really important piece. So hang on to that. And then the continuous text, the other option is a series of texts that all string together in a story from the Old Testament. And the continuous text is Jeremiah 29. And this is the part in Jeremiah where there are other prophets that are saying, "Peace, peace." And Jeremiah knows that peace is not what's really happening. And they're in the middle of exile. All of the people, the king and all of the elites have been marched off to Babylon into exile. And is this other group of prophets who are saying, "We'll be back in like 2 years. Don't even worry about it. God is going to make sure that we're back here in like 2 years." And Jeremiah says, "No, that's not what's going to happen. You need to make the best of this situation." And so he tells them, and this is the part that you might have heard, the quote that you might have heard, "to prosper the land in which you live," right? So he tells them, marry people there, get yourself a house, plant a garden, because you're gonna be there a while. And then there's Psalm 111, which is, "I will give thanks to the Lord with my whole heart." And then there's Second Timothy is the reading from the epistle, in which Paul is a prisoner, and he is reminding the recipients of this letter that the word can't be bound, that the word will always lead into freedom, even if you are in shackles. So those are the texts. So what I want to do is, there's a couple of themes that I see really resonating with the text that Dr. Gia was talking about. And the first theme is this idea of liminal spaces. So I'm an anthropologist by training. And one of my professors, one of my teachers, she taught me much more than just anthropology, was Edie Turner. She was a female anthropologist before female anthropologists were a thing. Her husband was an anthropologist, and she was like, "Yeah, let's do this thing," and went with them and raised their kids in his fieldwork locations. And she was eventually trained as a shaman, both in their African fieldwork location and in what later was her fieldwork in northern Alaska. So she was trained as a shaman in two different traditions, and she taught me how to do a rain dance and taught me how to read tarot cards, and just a brilliant, amazing woman. And the key insight that she and her husband brought to the field of anthropology was this understanding of liminal spaces. So Dr. Gia was describing that borderland between Galilee and Samaria. And Jesus didn't have to go that way, right? He could have walked down the Jordan and gone up through Jericho and never entered the borderlands. He didn't have to do that. But he chose to go into this space that's called a liminal space. And you would be, let's talk about a rite of passage. That's what they were first looking at, rites of passage. When you are going to get married, say, you have some rituals that remove you from your everyday existence, such as an engagement party, and then further remove you with a bachelor party or a bachelorette party, right? And then during the day of your wedding, you are separated and set apart as something special and different. And that's the liminal space. And then you're reincorporated back into society after you go on your honeymoon, you come back and you're reincorporated back into society as a new being in society. Your status as a single person has been removed and it's been shifted, and now you are a new being back in society. That applies not only to rites of passage, there are entire people who live in liminal spaces. And in some cultures, those liminal spaces are honored and set apart as sacred spaces. So think of Native American three spirit peoples. Think of shamans. Shamans in any culture are considered liminal people. They're people often who can't do the work that the rest of society does because often of physical disabilities that become shamans because they are able to transgress the boundaries between the spirit world and the solid world. Those are liminal people, liminal beings in a way. And we don't make a lot of space for liminal beings in Western culture. Liminal people are usually just rejected in some way or another, or allowed to fall through the cracks of society. And I mean, I think that's one of the things that's happening in our culture right now is that the people at the margins, the people who live in liminal spaces are saying, we cannot live here as liminal beings anymore. You need to acknowledge us and give us a space in society because these are some of the characteristics of liminal spaces. Um, Reversal of social norms, ambiguity, disorientation, the ability to see things from a different perspective, a way that you might not have seen things before, a shift in identity. Liminal spaces are very often the spaces of innovation, where somebody says, let's try this a different way. Communitas is the sense of belonging that is often built between people in liminal spaces. So think about like a rite of passage in an indigenous culture where there'll be an age group that will be set aside to go on a spirit walk or to go through some sort of ritual together. They have now a communitas, a sense of connection. I mean, think of your communion class, or your confirmation class, that group that now has a bond, and 20 years down the road they'll say we did that together, and they will still have that connection, right? But it's also a space of fear because the rules don't apply in the same way in liminal spaces as they do in everyday spaces, or let's say normative spaces. um, and renewal is a big part of the liminality, that as it is moving back into incorporation, back into normative society, there is a renewal of a sense of what the future holds. So it's a space between what was and what's coming. And that renewal is, now I have a different way of thinking about the future. So let's say for grief is a very liminal space that we like to ignore all the time. But part of the work of grief is to let go of what you thought the future was going to be, with whatever that loss might be. And now you have to rewrite the future and tell yourself a different story about what the future will be now that you have this different perspective that you've gotten from this liminal space. So in our texts, we see Naaman and the Hebrew girl, right? That slave. Slaves exist in liminal space. That's just the nature of slavery. You have not got the kind of choice that you have in normative society about who you are, what you're going to be, what your identity is, how you plan to live your future. You cannot make plans for that future because you are enslaved, and it is impossible to make a plan for the future when you don't have control over the rest of today, right? Um, and then in the story, Elisha sends Naaman into a liminal space. He sends him to wash in the Jordan. And Naaman even says, "Why should I wash in the Jordan? Don't we have good enough rivers back in my homeland?" But the Jordan is a land, it is a borderland in itself, right? The people of Israel crossed the Jordan into the promised land. The Jordan marks the boundary between Israel and not Israel. So he is sent into a liminal space to wash and then comes out renewed, right? He is renewed. He is, and the community that he finds in his space of illness, he finds so many people who want to help him, including an enslaved girl who wants to help make him well. And then in the other Old Testament story, we have the story of the exile, which is exile is in of itself a liminal space. To be in exile is to be a person who is liminal at all times. And Jeremiah is trying to encourage them rather than remaining in the mindset of liminality. He's trying to encourage them to find a new normal in this place because they can't possibly move into the future without having come to some sense of a new normal. And he makes the assurances in other parts of his writings that yes, you will come back to the land, the promised land, but for now, you need to make a new normal where you are. And then, of course, Paul is in prison, which is another liminal space, and he's trying to encourage the people to see that even when they are imprisoned, the gospel in its way is that passage out of liminality for everybody. So we can understand the gospel, the freedom of the gospel, the new lens of the gospel as being in a way this what like if we are in this liminal space, the gospel is a way of incorporating us back into some kind of normative, but the gospel has all of these qualities within it, right? The reversal of social norms. I mean, that's Mary's song, right? Especially in the book of Luke. There's so much about this liminal way of seeing the world that Jesus has entered in, and Jesus is himself liminal, right? He is not fully, he is fully human and fully divine at the same time. He is neither nor, but yet both and. And that is the thing that's really the 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 key to Jesus is that he is neither nor, but also both and. And that is good news, right? Because for those of us who are liminal in our being, especially those who are suffering from some sort of illness, those who have been marginalized from society, that that both and pulls people back into society and says you have a right to be a part of the normative society, even if you are not normal. And I'm putting the word normal in quotations, right? So the gospel is very good news for those who feel stuck in liminality. So I want to also bring up, so, I'll talk more about the liminal thing, but that's kind of like very big crash course in liminality. But I also want to point out, because Dr. Gia was talking about um, our biases and that work of trying to get rid of our biases or recognize our biases, because our biases, especially in Western empire culture, we are one of the main biases we carry is that there is not enough. It's a bias of um, scarcity, right? We are taught that there is not enough in the world, and that is why we have to reject those people over there, right? Because they're coming for our stuff. They're coming, we don't have enough stuff to share. We have to hoard our stuff. And so Dr. Gia was talking about that Eucharisto, that concept of giving thanks. And it when we were talking before we started, it made me think of what Luther says in the Small Catechism about the Lord's Prayer. He over and over he says, God's good and gracious whatever comes about without our prayer. We God provides food for us, our daily bread, without our prayer. God's kingdom comes without our prayer. But we ask this, we pray that it might come about among us. And what this Eucharist, the act of giving thanks, of praising God for God's providence, is an act of prayer to that it might come about among us, not the abundance is there, but that we would notice it, that we would see that abundance and begin to take that into our hearts and shift our perspective to see God's abundance and not come to the world with a scarcity mentality, not come to our neighbor with a scarcity mentality. And then the final word I wanted to offer was beware of ableism in this, right? Anybody who says that they are healthy and well is only temporarily so, right? Everybody will experience disability at some point in their life, whether it's a broken leg or a torn ACL or a permanent disability that leaves them in a new way of being, right? And so there's a lot of work being done on disability rights and on looking at texts through the lens of disability. And I highly recommend that. I'm by no means an expert in that, but I am somebody who has lived with chronic pain my whole life. And I have children who are struggling with long COVID and with other long-term disabilities. And so I want to just remind us that not all healing looks the same and not all disabilities are visible from the outside. And sometimes healing is its own burden. Sometimes getting well requires moving again, letting go of what you thought the future was going to be and rewriting a different future than the one you had been working on, which is its own kind of grief, no matter whether it's so-called positive or negative, right? It's always a work to let go of that and focus differently. And then also that healthy community is health. Being in community, that's one of the things that Jesus does over and over again, is to reincorporate people into community. And that's the core of the healing. For him, the core of the problem with somebody who is unwell is that they have been pushed into the margins. They've been dropped out of the community because of the way that the society works. They've been pushed into those borderlands, and now he is working to reincorporate them into the community. And that is in and of itself health, even if their physical or mental or invisible illness or disability isn't healed. Being part of the community is health. So I love pictures. Anybody who's been in one of these knows I think one of the best ways to interrupt white supremacy culture is to share images of scripture that are not white supremacist pictures. And so I look every week, I go and search for images. And this is an image of the Jewish slave girl. Here's Naaman in the water. Here's the Jewish slave girl talking to him. I just think these are beautiful images. Here's Jeremiah in prison. That was last week's text. Um, and then the 10 lepers. I thought this one was particularly beautiful from the Indian subcontinent. So I will stop sharing, and I know it's after 1 o'clock, but I would love for us, and I'm here. Anybody who has time, please stick around and have some conversation here.
Yeah, yeah. I just have to say, I kept wanting to type into the chat, but I did want to distract of like how rich this is. Like, I don't know, like I'm looking and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad we're doing this thing. And how rich it is, right? And so yes, we are a little bit behind, and like every single thing I feel like we lifted up, it was so valuable to the study. Right now, I might be a little biased since I'm one of the facilitators, but I felt like you were talking. I'm like, yes, 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 right. So here's what we'll do. I'm gonna keep this recording. Know that we do want to honor your time. So we're gonna work toward getting to 1 o'clock. Right. And as we're working through, some times will be longer than others. And then if you have to go, we totally understand. And you can certainly catch the recording at the end as well. But I do want to give us, let's say, like 10 minutes, right? If there are folks that have thoughts or questions or things like this, I want to allow that space too. If there's things that it's lifting up and raising up for you, we want to hear that as well. So we just want to make room for that, as we're processing.
Yeah.
So, does anybody feel like you have something? Either you can put it in the chat or you can unmute, that was particularly enlightening for you, or something that you want to process a bit more. Hi, Deacon Kenna.
I just want to say hi and bye and thank you. We're doing a different text this week, but I wanted to see y'all's faces and hear your voice. So,
Oh, well, I'm glad that you were here, and I hope it was still valuable for you.
absolutely.
Yeah.
With the Dr. Reverence, heck yeah.
Oh my gosh, you're so valuable. Thank you. Thoughts that anybody wanted to share?
I think you kind of solved my dilemma because we did Naaman just a few weeks ago when we were doing the continuous. So it's like, okay, so I'm going to do Jeremiah instead. But then when I started looking at the Luke story, it's like we're probably one of the few churches that actually has a Thanksgiving Eve service. And that's the Luke story.
That's the story, yeah.
And I'm sitting there thinking, now what am I going to do? I can't. But I like the idea of liminality.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've got, because the gospel's the gospel for the day. And I think I can do that on one hand this Sunday, and then come 6 weeks from now, Dr. Gia, go back to yours and focus on the Luke story then. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Because I was sitting here thinking, how am I going to navigate all
Yeah.
of this? And I
Yeah.
think Diane's head nodding is, I'm in the same boat.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. I was thinking the same thing because typically when we see Luke 7, when we see that, we see that, it's always a Thanksgiving go-to text, right?
Yeah,
And so I'm always like, why are we looking at this in October? Right? And part of my thought is like, isn't it interesting though, too, that we tend to hover around certain emotions in certain times of the year, as if, gratitude and Thanksgiving isn't something that we should be considering,
any other.
in July, in today. I mean, given what's happening in our world today,
Mhm.
right? That we would be talking about gratitude, right? So I feel like there there are definitely some advantages to seeing it kind of surface
Yeah.
before the typical time,
Mhm.
right? But I also love the idea. I love the fact that we're making time for the supportive text because I feel like so many times we only focus on the gospel text, and there's so much more that's here that we need to tend to. And so I'm glad that you feel that it was a faithful approach. Yeah.
Well, and I think that liminality, especially now, I mean, there's all we always kind of live in, but we seem to be particularly in this in between, cast out, marginalized, whatever, however you want to look at it, liminal space. And I think that is something that half of my congregation will resonate with as they're trying to figure out how to continue to navigate the next several years.
Mhm.
Even though we're an all white congregation, we still are trying to figure out how we navigate. And we've got the other half of the congregation that's trying to figure out, well, why is everybody all upset? And maybe an exploration of what it means to live in this space can give them something to chew on a little bit.
It might be helpful to know that the people who originally wrote about liminality. So Victor and Edie Turner, the first person to write about it was a folklorist called Van Gennep. But when they were writing about it as being a part of a rite of passage, that was their focus.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a big part of what they were saying was that there has to be that reincorporation into the back into society, because nobody can live in a liminal space for very long. It's a highly stressful space to live in. And so, and I think it might be helpful to share that and to invite the people in your congregation to think about a liminal time for them, whether that
Yeah.
was college. College is a 4 year long liminal time for most people.
Yeah.
Um, whether it was their wedding and the celebrations surrounding that, or a funeral of a parent or a spouse, something like that. Those kind of rituals, and how invite them, or summer camp. Summer camp is a
Mhm.
major liminal space that a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people get to experience. And when or vacation, when you come back, in spite of like, oh, I have to get back to the norm, like there's a sense of relief
Yeah.
of coming back to the norm, back to your normal space, and then invite them to imagine having to live in that liminal space all the time.
And, it's like, how often do we say, "Oh man, I just can't wait to get back to my own bed."
Right.
Even when we're on vacation and having fun, even when we're at summer camp and having fun. I can't wait to have my mom's or my dad's cooking. I can't wait to whatever that situation is, right?
Yep.
And the Hebrew Bible is filled with liminal spaces. I
Hmm.
mean, we've
Mhm.
got the Exile, but before that, we've got Exodus. We have 40
Hmm.
years of liminal space before
Yes.
they finally get settled.
Right.
And we talk about Lent being that same sort of idea. We talk about interim pastors
Yeah.
filling that same role, you've got to go through the desert before you get you new pastures so that you can make that switch from one life into another life. All of those sorts of things. We talk about liminality in that way.
And those are often the spaces where God is most present to the people,
Yep.
is in
Yeah.
those
Yep.
liminal spaces, in the desert, on the mountaintop.
Yep. Yep.
And
Yeah.
figuratively and literally, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think I would be remiss if I didn't also just kind of make a statement about the challenge it is to remain hopeful in liminal
Yes.
spaces.
Yes.
Yes.
How we continue to expect people that are in liminal spaces to, right, to still have a positive outlook and to continue to keep striving. We keep on
Yeah.
saying, here's a good example. This is just my own pet peeve. I'm just gonna name that, okay? The song "We Shall Overcome"
Mm,
someday.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, why can't we say Tuesday or Saturday, but we just say someday? And
yeah.
somehow we're all okay with someday. And we expect that people will be patient waiting
Yeah.
on that someday. We expect that their posture will be pleasant and optimistic, that they will go along with the status quo of someday, and that there's not as much of an urgency, right? The urgency isn't in alignment with people that are in liminal spaces versus
Yeah.
people that would be in the center. So I just I just also want to kind of name that too, is like we just kind of we put these expectations that people, that they'll be
Yeah.
understanding, that they'll be patient, that they'll wait, that the lack of urgency is understandable.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, that's what
uh,
Niebuhr got in trouble for. Many people got in trouble for of sitting there
right,
saying, now's not the time. We can't move so
right,
quickly. People don't want us
right,
to move so quickly. And
right.
the black population was saying, we have been here for 400 years.
Mm-hmm.
How
Like, what
long
are
do
we,
we have to
right?
wait?
And we
Right.
just continue, there's just something about that someday in that song that I just can't, I just can't I can't unlock my clenched teeth with it,
Yeah.
because it's because we've been singing that song.
For
I remember
forever.
singing that song as a child, right? Like,
Right.
and so like, when is someday?
Yeah.
Like when is that? And so to say in these liminal spaces, oh, you know what? It's just never. I should just
Yeah.
go ahead and accept that this may not ever happen
Yeah.
in our lifetime, and I should still be okay in this nameless liminal space. Like, even people that are going to college know, okay, you know what? In four,
Right.
5, 6 years, I know there's a light at
I'm
the end of, I
done.
know
I'm
there's an
done.
end to that.
Yep.
Right? And so even it is again about managing our expectations
Yeah.
of
Well,
what we expect of people.
It,
Yeah.
it occurs to me that Victor Turner was a white man, right?
mhm.
And he was born 100 years ago, right? Like he was a white man of the early 20th century. And he sat in a place of privilege. He was,
Mhm.
and so for him to say, nobody can live in a liminal space indefinitely is a statement of privilege.
Yeah.
And the fact is, it's we should never ask anybody to live
Yeah.
in liminal spaces. And Native
Yeah.
American culture and other indigenous cultures, and probably Northern European culture at some point in history, had a space that was for those people, a way for those people who were in between to be able to be part of the culture. There was a place in society as a shaman or as a three spirit person or whatever it might be. And our society just, and I am convinced it's because of capitalism, right? And that scarcity mentality that is part of capitalism, that says there's not enough, and everybody's worth is in their productivity, right? What you can contribute to society, that's your worth. So if you are not somebody who is able to contribute to society, our society tells you you don't have any worth, you have no
Right.
place.
Right.
right? And our current administration is saying things like, maybe those people should just be euthanized.
Yeah.
You know, that has been the solution in some societies, Nazi society. You
Yeah.
know, just get rid of those people, and then we won't have to worry about making accommodations. Accommodations are so much a hassle. They interrupt our goal of making more money. And that's not a, well, it's not a Christian approach, right? But it's not even a human approach.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Totally.
yeah.
Yeah. As you were talking, I was trying to I was I wanted to look up some of the I was reading an article, and I'll find it and I'll attach it in the comments of the YouTube. But I was looking at an article about the same thing, about people that are living with disabilities, and right, and also that kind of hurry up and wait, the expectation, like our and they were talking, like they did a full inventory of like how there was a study that was done. 78% of our congregations, of our buildings are not, of our churches are not ADA accessible.
Yeah.
And yet there is this, right? There is this expectation of like, okay, well then you'll just log on, right? Or you'll stay in this space and you only get to experience God through the window, through the looking glass,
Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
think that's
Yeah.
what it was called. And I was looking for that because it exactly saying what you're saying of of this kind of just the reality that we also are not very helpful in getting people out of the liminal spaces.
Yeah.
We're right. I mean that privilege, we don't even see it. Out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, which is
Right.
where your pan comes in, right?
Right.
Like to really notice what's happening around us
Right.
and recognize
Yes.
when somebody's having a hard time with the
Right.
stairs, or
Yeah.
Right. Right.
and not to, and our oftentimes our first reaction is that learned reaction of like, can't believe you can't get up those stairs. I mean, come on.
Hurry up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Like I had a friend in
Yeah.
seminary who had chronic pain, severe fibromyalgia, and
Mhm.
some mental illness as well. And she had a handicap tag for her car, and she would come out of her apartment and put her trash in the trunk of her car and drive it up to the dumpster and then put it in the dumpster. And she said she would get the meanest looks from people for getting out of her car with a handicapped tag and not having a wheelchair or crutches or something that showed she needed it. And then also for being so lazy that she wouldn't just walk her trash to the dumpster. And you know, that's kind of, and these were seminary students that were her neighbors that were giving her these looks. Like that's kind of
Yeah.
it's one of our internal biases, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That we
Yeah.
just assume, even no matter how many times we say it, there's something like deep in our bones that assumes that somebody who is unwell deserves it for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that if they aren't visibly unwell, that they're probably just lazy.
Yeah.
They-
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And it's important for us. The reason why I brought up Carl Linnaeus is because it's important for us to recognize where these biases come from.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
where they originated, and how they are just so deeply ingrained in our psyche
Yes.
that we just automatically finish people's sentences before even giving them an opportunity to speak for themselves. We just automatically assume that we kind of project how we assume they're feeling and how they're going to respond, even just from looking at an image, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
think about angry black man, right? Angry black woman. You think about like some of the things that we hear about people that are living in the world, and those kind of labels have been attached, and then automatically it's just like we decide who's worthy. We decide who gets the help and who doesn't, which was like, I'm telling you, I got so mad when I saw, and he was a Samaritan. And I was just like, You know what I mean, the shock of that, the
Mhm.
shock of like of that a Samaritan would do something like that. It just the bias is so, and I want to go to Luke and just say, you
Come
know,
on, Luke.
let's talk about this, but I think that is important. And I hope that, like these themes make um, is such a rich conversation. And I hope that these themes actually, if you go back and you take a look and you're reading through these texts yourself this week, that you'll pause and consider where you find yourself in
Mhm.
these stories. What are the behaviors that you tend to expect
Yeah.
from people? Right? What are the behaviors that you expect from people that are differently abled, or maybe you prefer the term disabled? What are the people that you expect? What are the behaviors you expect from people who are who are navigating poverty? People who, right? What do you expect from people who are unhoused? What is the response that you expect from that? And where did you hear that? Like spend some, where did you get that bias from? To just kind of travel that along to kind of begin to see that, because from our biases don't, we think they stay here, but they don't. They actually move out of our mind, and they impact our actions. They impact our words. They impact our relationships. They impact our worship. Right?
Very much
Like these
so.
are all things that are really important to even slow down and take a look at that, and consider that. So I'm really, really grateful that you all, again, have prioritized this time, that you have spent this time with us. We're going to be here every week, and we'll be rotating. So next week, Dr. Aimée will lead with a study on the gospel text, and I will carry the themes of the supportive texts. And we will continue to make our way through this. But if you find that you have questions that come up, we may not have answers, but we'll definitely do a deep dive with you, to look and to learn. We're learning with you. So if you have questions that come up or that rise, if you're watching this recording or you are tuning in live and you have questions, send us an email. You've got my email because I'm the one that sent you the reminders, and I've copied Dr. Aimée, so you've got hers as well. So if you have questions, send them to us, or thoughts, and we'll share them with the community. Other than that, we will see you next week. Let's get ready to prepare our hearts to close in prayer. Good and gracious, all the time, all the ways, everywhere, God, we give you thanks that you do not align yourself with human measures, human margins, human liminal spaces, human disparities. God, thank you for your intentional design. We give you thanks for the richness of this word, of this good news, God. And I ask that you continue to nudge us in our hearts, to convict us in our spirits, and to call us to question how we do things, why we do things, and how we can do things differently to model our lives and our ministries after Jesus. God, give us the courage to ask the hard questions, and also the courage to seek the challenging answers, God. And bring us back again, God. This is your space. Bring us back again next week so that we can dig and dive and